One of the most difficult fights in the game is the Hidden. I'm gonna go ahead and run here the Hidden with additional fire damage. It's alked, it's rare. It's not so bad. It's, could be far worse. But the Hidden is one of the most difficult fights in the game. This video is a little different than normal. As you can see, it's pretty long, much longer than my normal videos. But we're just gonna kind of have a casual look without any editing at footage of beating the Hidden and Uber Shaper. Now, whenever you walk into the Hidden, the most important thing is to find Esh. Frankly, that's number one priority. You find Esh, you target Esh first. Esh is the most dangerous by far. You have to get Esh out ASAP because of his shockwave. Instantly he tried to shockwave, and so that's why I dodged. Now, Toll is the second most difficult. This build, as you can see, was able to tank a lot of the snowballs, but combined Esh and Toll was just too much. I didn't kill Esh quite quick enough, but that's okay. All in all, this build is certainly not hardcore viable, I will say. Unless you just want to run like tier 16s casually, but you could do that just fine. But trying this difficult post-endgame content, definitely not a hardcore build because it has no block, it has no shield. And it has very little armor, and it has no spell suppression. But check this out. That was great, like one portal, one death. The Hidden is one of the hardest fights in the game. When I had my custom league, I made sure to include the Hidden as a challenge because it's so difficult. If you can clear the Hidden, you're doing great. You can see the sheer power of this build. I've really been working on it. All league. This one character. One character all league. I do have a hardcore character that's really behind on optimization, but I've been working on... I made it into an arc build first as a challenge, and it was good, but it couldn't do shit like this. It was originally intended as a Stormbrand build, and so that's what I made it into. And I have another video on the general Stormbrand build setup. Now, as you can see, of course, we're inside Uber Shaper now. I ran back because I didn't know if this Astral Plate had any kind of like Shaper influence. I didn't look hard enough, so I ran back in. So the Shaper fight, relatively challenging. If you can clear Shaper, you're doing pretty good, Especially solo self-found, you clear Shaper, you're doing really well. Hardcore, you clear Shaper, you're doing well in general. This is, of course, softcore trade. But when it comes to Uber Shaper, it's the same fight essentially, but there are a variety of changes that I'll go over as we go. The main, if you look in the corner there, monsters take 70% less damage, and it's an eye level 85, which means it's a tier 17. So these bosses we're fighting are taking 70% less damage, in addition to the fact that they're tier 17, or 18. Tier 18, right? Eye level 80, sorry, tier 18. These are tier 18 bosses, including the Shaper himself. And bosses take less damage. So as you can see, it's a Stormbrand build. It uses Steel Skin for protection. At the end, I'm going to go into full detail on the build. I try to keep my videos short generally. I decided to just do a long play, a long analysis. Dominus turned to Domino's Pizza. We're going to go ahead and get through this phasing. This is not the hard part. The hard part is Uber Shaper himself. Any of these post-endgame Uber bosses, not counting Uber Elder, Uber Itziri, Uber Azaro, they call those Ubers too, but it's just like in Diablo 2, they have like the Pandemonium event, and then you have Clone Diablo. They're both kind of called Uber Diablo, depending on who you ask. These things are no joke. Like, Shaper is nothing. I remember when Shaper was the endgame boss, like, of the entire Path of Exile, but now, like, I was very frustrated because I'm someone that always develops my own builds. And so, when they invented these, like, Uber Cyrus, Uber Cortex, Uber Shaper, Uber Elder, Uber Maven, Uber Searing Etchark, Uber Eater of Worlds, I thought, good God, this is so hard. They're for extreme expert players or people that use very limited, meta builds. But I always develop my own builds, so I wanted to beat this with my own custom Stormbrand. You can see right off the bat, one big difference is 2 Shaper clones plus Shaper. Here's the next big difference right here. There's no Zana's bubble to protect you. So you have to dodge. You have to dodge the bullet hell, it's called, which is essentially cold and physical damage. Now there's the other thing, right there. when the Shaper does the teleport slam, it has like 3 times the area of effect of normal Shaper. Lots of cold and physical damage balls here. This build, as I say, it has about 22% resting armor. It has more when I'm near a Pinnacle Atlas boss, which I'll go into again at the end why. But its armor is mediocre. It has no evasion rating at all, like nothing. Mostly it depends on tremendous energy shield leech or energy shield on hit, and a very fast energy shield recharge rate. It has 7 auras. You'll see me turning them on right there. It's a horribly sloppy Shaper run. As you watch, you'll see what I mean. Double curse I'm putting on him. Lots of balls to avoid. The shaped ground, the cosmic ground, whatever you want to call it, is the least of our worries. In the old days it was, you know, a nuisance. But this has enough energy shield regeneration and recharge and so on to sustain itself pretty okay. I hit 6700 ES at one point, but I sacrificed some of it for a combination of damage and one other trick, which really helped the setup, which I'm going to reveal at the end. Now, when you're running between phases here, it's normally seamless, but right there, boom, notice something very terrible happen. The Shaper fight has no chaos damage except those little zombies that happen to spawn. Zombies can do chaos damage. I think it's some kind of like Viper Strike. So I didn't die like any... It was a totally fair death, right? That was not bullshit. That was just getting hit with a tiny amount of chaos damage from a normal enemy. Very frustrating because the Shaper's healing as I'm running. But you saw I had full energy shield. I have 11 life. And so any chaos damage is going to obliterate us because we're not wearing a Chevrons. Now we are on this build wearing a Chevrons for 95% of content. But for certain challenges, I realized I just had to take the Chevrons off. It was just the only way. And so I just had bad luck, but that's okay. I use Frostblink a lot. I don't know what it is about Flame Dash. I think it's the fact that Flame Dash is not an instant skill, so it distracts your other skills. I'm hitting so many buttons all the time in my playstyle that I do like... I just prefer Frostblink, especially I use Divergent Frostblink, which increases cooldown when you're near a unique. So here's the Shaper's Lap Bitch. And so we took them out pretty fast considering of course, that this is Uber Shaper.
Father, it's me. Let me help you.
The horror must be stopped. Obstacles destroyed.
What I'm very cautiously doing here, because I've run quite a few of these. This, I think, is the second time I actually beat Uber Shaper, but this time I wanted to have it recorded. Horribly difficult to dodge those, but a combination of one of our flasks with a specific trick on my tree was able to let me tank a little tiny bit of those. Now right here, I cannot tank his slam without some kind of spell suppression. This build has too much invested in crit, shock, elemental damage, combined with cast speed, combined with energy shield, combined with defenses, combined with attacks. Really scaling my attacks. I have no shield, I have no block. I could not properly invest in the spell suppression without sacrificing something, so... For most things it doesn't matter, you don't need spell suppression, but things like this it would come in very handy, certainly. Any of these Uber bosses, you just have to play well, like, at the end of the day. I don't care how tanky you are. There's some builds that are absurd that are, you know, like 3 to 4 mirror expense. That was a fair death because I died to the beam combined with the balls, combined with everything else. Now I said it's not a hardcore viable build. It can be, again, if you're just careful and don't run shit like this, but if you want to run all content, yeah, this is... needless to say, not going to work on hardcore. But by really scaling my damage up, this is most certainly my strongest build to date, and I think worth actually posting to the forums, because I did post my other Stormbrand, my high shock, no crit version, and this one beats that one out by for sure. So I should definitely post it. And so maybe you're even looking at this video from that link, if possible, in the future. Now I kept throwing brands in front of me, like way in front of me, because I was afraid of the tiny bit of chaos damage. Now, chaos damage is not a concern on this build. For, again, 95% of things you wear as chevrons. It just takes your ES down to like 5k. Cuts your ES recharge rate. Those are the two big problems with it. So for these, not bossing, but like you can run Maven with chevrons, fine. Like nothing, man. Uber Maven, yeah, you're gonna want this setup better. Haven't actually tried Uber Maven. Should try it. I definitely want to try Uber Eater of Worlds next because I think it does some chaos damage. I mean, excuse me, not chaos, cold damage. And we have a lot of ways to mitigate cold damage after working on the Uber Shaper. What I'm doing here is I'm boom, 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 lightning conduiting. You build shocks and then you pull them off and you just lightning conduit. And it does really nice damage. It scales really well, especially when the brands stay on them. It's a nice combination. And so it got very close here, as you can see, and this has happened many times. This is a terrible challenge, man. I've had builds that just get melted and you can't even think about trying Uber Shaper. Because you can get the defense but not the damage, or you can get the damage but not the defense. Playing this glass cannon sucks. I actually tried it. I tried it a little bit without a helmet. Remember I had a video where Witch takes off her helmet? And I was trying it with, whatever that's called. I can't think of the name now. Dance with Death, I think. There it is. Now, I wasn't lucky enough to get a Sublime Vision. Of course, I wanted that very badly. But of course, it didn't fall. But still, Uber Shaper, viable, kind of, with effort. It was done. It's the first time I've beaten an Uber boss that wasn't, you know, like I say, Uber Elder or Uber Zeri. A proper Uber boss. Now here's the full look at what I'm doing. Bottled Faith with increased effect gives you life regeneration, gives more damage taken to enemies. We use a movement flask. We use crit with immunity to corrupted blood. As much stack on armor as we can on our granite flask. And then what I mentioned before, this here, which gives a little curse mitigation too, by the way, which is nice. But mostly for the cold damage reduction taken. Double wand setup. Lots of lightning, lots of spell, lots of cast speed. +1 to all lightning skills. Crown of the Inward Eye with Stormbrad penetrates. Lightning res, very important. Presence of Cheula. Cannot be stunned. Lots of chaos res. Conversion to energy shield. We have a conductivity ring, which also lowers our mana cost. We have an elemental weakness ring, lowering our mana cost. And aspect of the avian. Apothecary gloves give us both lightning exposure and unnerve, as well as a lot of other just necessary things. Lots of armor too, by the way, on those gloves. Strength and resist belt. A little bit of armor as well. Here, lots of armor buff when we're near a Pinnacle Atlas boss such as Shaper himself. As well as Onslaught, of course. Herald of Thunder. Discipline. Zealotry. Enlighten to reduce the mana cost. 7 auras without a shield, without a Prism Guardian. Lightning Conduit has our Culling Strike. A way to form power charges. We have 2 sources of power charges, just in case. And Spell Echo. Mostly using these things here. Frostblink, as I mentioned before. Val Discipline is very nice because it just keeps healing even when you take damage. Stone Golem. Brand Recall mandatory. Zealous Oath applies all of our life regen to energy shield regen. Anomalous Wrath with arrogance and precision for our life pool to go low life. And then Stone Golem has minion life and elemental army, so we don't have to resummon it quite as much. Here's where we put just Clarity, Divergent Frostblink. Chevrons is what we use, again, 95% of the time. For low life. But we can be low life without a Chevrons. Excuse me, can't take chaos damage. Bastion of Elements for more defense. Shaper of Storms to make us always shock. Huge shock buff. We're going to have a buff to exposure, which synergizes with the glove mod. And convergence when we hit a unique enemy, which gives us a big fat elemental damage increase. We have lots of crit nodes and focus on crit. We have lots of focus here on brands. Lightning damage, cast speed, energy shield, mana. Works very well with the transfiguration mods because of modifications to mana help our spell damage. Runebinder mandatory for any brand build, Runesmith, and of course brand equity. And the old Holy Conquest, we're going to take this where it's great for clearing a map. A little bit of mana reduction. Light radius, it's the only way to get it. Lots of buffs to our crits. Here's all our jewels going on, or our gems, excuse me. you know, 3 crit gems with +3. Inspiration, the Stormbrand itself, increased crit damage, added lightning damage, awakened. Concentrated effect, Divergent, increased critical strikes is our other source of power charges, by the way. Along with Lightning Conduit. Now this is a little bit buffed to Shock Effect, which scales because Lightning Conduit pulls off the shocks and increases the damage based on the effect of shock that was pulled off. Because we're not taking static blows anymore. Just couldn't fit it. Overshock, same thing, lightning damage based. Stormdrinker for penetration of lightning. Zealotry, mana reduction, so we can have 7 auras. Without a Prism Guardian, which is not easy, by the way. Especially with modern day cluster nodes. Basics of Pain for crit. Pressure points for double damage. We have 2 sources of double damage. One is pressure points, and one is Aspect of the Avian. This is my secret right here, Veteran's Awareness. I read about it online. And when you use a guard skill like Steelskin, it gives you a temporary 10% max. Now, it lasts a very short amount of time. We might want to use an increased duration support. You certainly could. I just didn't. I certainly probably should have, maybe, to make it last longer. But that was a way that I survived the balls. Now, for our Pantheon, we want Freeze immunity. So I keep Soul the Brand King on all the time. And then Solar Ralakesh. This is for helping us on Cyrus. We don't have a Corrupted Blood immunity source, and so we just use Solar Ralakesh to protect us against any kind of sources of bleed because of our relatively low armor. Now, when we're not using Chiron's wrappings, when we're doing like the Hidden and the Uber Shaper, and Uber Eater of Worlds as well, I wear this. I bought this, which is, and I made it. I bought it and then made the implicits, which is Wrath Effect, Crit Multiplier, and as you can see, Energy Shield Recharge, Faster Start, which is actually a Watcher's Eye mod with a massive pool. Now, sadly, from 6200, when we're running non-specialty runs, we go like this, it's only like 5k. It's significantly less, without the Faster Start. We still have lots of Energy Shield Recharge rate, but it doesn't start as fast. This look familiar? This is from a recent video of mine. I'm wearing it. I made this in a recent video of mine. Go check it out. And then our Watcher's Eye here. Most important is Energy Shield per enemy hit with Discipline, but the other stuff is incredibly nice, incredibly helpful. A lot of fun making this build. I'm done with this shit though.